Hi, everybody. Just getting my Instagram started, but excited to do this Q&A. Give me 1 second and we will get started. All right, here we are. So, welcome to Crushing Doubt's Q&A, everybody. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. I'm here, as always, to talk about mind-body symptoms. Let's start by defining what that is, of course, because there are some people who are just tuning in, and sometimes it's actually good for everybody else to brush up on. So, mind body symptoms are anything that happens in your body for the reasons of thoughts or feelings. Now, most people discover mind body symptoms because they have some kind of symptom, physical symptom, that isn't getting resolved. And that includes going to doctors and asking them what to do. This is how I discovered this work and this way of thinking is through 8 years of chronic everyday back pain. I wish I could have discovered it in some easier sort of way or shorter sort of way. But as it turned out, I do think it ended up being a blessing in the long run. Um, that being said, it was no blessing at the time. It certainly didn't seem that way, and it also didn't seem like it had to end. So one of the reasons that I do this Q&A is even once I discovered that my brain or my mind and my mind's processes could actually cause physical symptoms, I needed lots of answers about what that meant and how to control it and how to use it and what were the limitations of it. And the questions went on and on and on. Now, listen, for the first 8 years of the back pain, I didn't have any answers. I didn't know that it was mind body. I didn't understand what it would be about. I had no sense that I would get better. And it was terrifying. And you guys have been through similar things. It went beyond terror, actually. It was terror at first. Then it was depression and feeling defeated and like I didn't see how life would be worth living in that way. And I needed answers, but I actually, even worse, didn't think that there were answers. Well, what I found out is that there were answers. I eventually got introduced, thankfully, to Dr. Sarno. Dr. Sarno was an MD at NYU. He's no longer with us, but he lived a great long life and helped so many people with his books. He saved my life with his books. And when I started reading, it all started to make sense. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, the riddle is right here. And I had no access to it. Nobody had told me about it. Nobody I knew, nobody in my life knew about this. And that was actually astounding. And it's part of why I do this work is I want everybody to get the information they need. And I know the difference that it makes to have this information or not. The people who don't have mind body information and are having symptoms, they could have those symptoms for the rest of their lives. They could have those symptoms cascade into other problems. They get no answers. It goes on and on and on. And the people who do get the right information can get better. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean everybody who gets the mind body information does instantly get better, but they can get better. And what I decided is, you know what? I need to get people the right information. As I read Sarno, I got a lot of answers, but I didn't get all my answers. I had so many questions. That's what this Q&A is about. It is about the fact that I discovered that when I had answers to questions, I started doing a lot better. And I got the basic idea from Sarno. Sarno said you had to be certain of the diagnosis. But when I thought about why do you have to be certain about the diagnosis, I came to this. If the mind can cause all these symptoms, then what our minds are doing is the key. And we're going to have to harness the power of the mind. And that means we're going to have to harness what the mind is doing. How do we do that? I couldn't do it without having my questions answered. So that's what this is for tonight. We're going to answer your questions, or I'm going to answer your questions to the best of my ability. What I want you to do, though, is here's how to think about the questions. They have to be answered to your satisfaction. Doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. If I answer a question, even if it gives you good information, but it doesn't quite settle something, I want you to ask a follow-up. That could be here. You could send me an email, dan@crushingdoubt.org. You can come to my groups. There's all kinds of ways to interact with me, but you need to get your questions answered until you are certain. There's a reason this channel is called Crushing Doubt. It is because the most important thing you can do to get rid of symptoms is to make sure that your questions are answered. Get all of that doubt down so that you can be certain you're going to get better and know why you're going to get better. What does that do? It relaxes your whole body. First, it relaxes your mind. Then it relaxes your whole body. And all that high nervous system response starts to calm down. Okay, I'm going to say hi to a couple people. Then I'm going to talk about my system briefly, and then we'll get into the questions. Dorisa, good to see you. Lynn Slavensky, good to see you. David Sereno, thank you for joining us here. He says, hi, Dan and everyone. So did Dorisa. And Lynn says, hi, everyone. And then Rhiannon says, hi, Dan and all. Good to see you all. This is such a great community. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but we're building a real community here. Karen Isaacs, good to see you here. Thanks for waving hi. Rita, thank you for joining us on Instagram and saying hello. And nice flower. It is Layla has joined us here. Good to see you, Layla. Catherine Toomer, good to see you. And Susie Cairns, good to see you. So please put all of your questions in. One thing I do want to encourage you all is that when I'm answering someone else's question, try not to think about it that you're just going to wait for me to answer your question. Of course, I want to answer your question. But one thing that I can tell you is to get the doubt down, to get all your questions answered, every question. Oh, it's Susan. I was going to say, I saw that. I was like, why do I recognize that name? Well, Susan, I understand. It's not David Sereno. It's Susan. Good to see you here, Susan. And sorry for not instantly recognizing the name. It totally rang true. I was like, well, I know this person, but now I know why. So when I'm answering someone else's question, remember, everyone's question is everyone's answer. You know, as we explore these questions, they're answers for everyone. And they're supposed to expand your knowledge of this. Now, let me talk briefly about my system. As I got better, Sarno said that emotions could cause symptoms because of a distraction. The emotion that we don't want to know about, the symptom comes in and distracts. He is right about that, but what I found out is that that's a third of the equation. And in fact, I'd say in some ways it's even a sixth of the equation, because the fact that emotions can cause this or require this symptom distraction, that's true, and that's great. But one thing that I do that extends that work, the emotion work, is that I show you how to do it. I show you how to find the emotion. What kind of emotions are we looking for? How do we look at the timing? These are the things that I describe in what I call the emotions column. My system is made up of columns, in theoretical columns, because when I got better, and then I started thinking about how to help other people get better, I realized there are really three different reasons there are symptoms. It's not just emotions. The emotions lead to the symptoms because there's that need for the distraction. But then I developed something that I call the doubt column. The doubt column is not about your feeling. It is about your thinking. Because if we're thinking the same things over and over, that channels into our body. Everything we're thinking stays the same. And this is why I have to answer your questions. If I don't, you think the same things, and then the same thing happens in your body. But if I change how you're thinking, then what happens in your body can change. The function in the doubt column is not distraction. The reason the symptoms are there is not to distract you, but to protect you. Now, here's the thing. You don't actually need the protection it thinks you need, but the symptom function in the doubt column is protection. It's like a helicopter parent. Can't stop protecting. And it not only does it cause you to worry all the time so that you'll be careful, but it tries to build outposts to make sure that you're safe later. So it tries to pick up different parts of life and get you to worry about that too, so that you can just stay in perpetual worry. And these are the symptoms that linger. The emotions column symptoms, as I found out, are for acute onsets and upticks in symptoms. They're not for all symptoms. And that was an important answer that I got as I explored even after reading Sarno. The ones that linger are these ones that are about thought, your thoughts that just do not change. Those are the seemingly chronic ones. It's what I call consistently acute. They're always there, but they can change at any given moment if we change our thinking. The last column is the power column. This is the column that usually takes the most time for people to fully understand. But the way the system flows is the first thing is we got to bring down doubt. Once we bring down doubt, then you can get more certain this is mind body. You can see why this is going to work. And then you start to get into the questions about, well, how is it going to work? What are the nuts and bolts? As we answer these questions, we slide over to the emotions column and we start to get people oriented to the emotions that can cause these acute onsets and upticks in symptoms. And you can learn to master those things through the emotions. But once that's done, once you've reduced doubt and understand your emotions, then you slide over to the power column. The power column is about your relationship with you. When people have a conflict with themselves, which is pretty typically something that people have, it can lead to what I call symptom plateaus. So acute onsets and upticks in symptoms are for the emotions column with that distraction function. For the doubt column, we've got those symptoms that seem to be chronic, and that's for the protection function. And in the power column, when you've gotten better, but only to a certain point, and you can't get past that, that's a plateau. That is the thing that helps me recognize we got a power column symptom going on here. And the power column function is different. The power column function is a third function, which is communication. There is a part of you that knows something important about you that has to get communicated. It has to be understood. So it can't be understood if there's all that doubt. And it can't be understood if you're having all these acute emotions column symptoms as well. So once we get those under control, then we can look over at the power column and find out what's happening there. What is the conflict with the self? There's tasks within each of these columns. It's actually not all that complicated. There's only 3 columns. There's only 3 functions. You can look at any given moment in mind-body experience to understand which one's which, what's happening when. And if you identify a problem well, you stand much more of a chance of addressing that problem. That's what the columns are about. Okay, a little bit of a long spiel about my whole column system, but I do like to explain it again, not just for new viewers, but even for people who have been doing this for a while. I find that the repetition is incredibly helpful. It's something that I kind of had to do in my own mind. I reread Sarno for a long time, and I just kept thinking about it, and I kept regimenting it in my mind. Here's the great thing. You don't have to work that hard at it. Eventually, it becomes totally automatic. It becomes like a way of thinking. Susan, I see you say it's very helpful. I'm glad it's helpful to review this. But one of the reasons is I want it to just become naturally the way you think. And here's the good news. I'm not just trying to get you to understand a system and to think this way. What I've found is this is a very accurate representation of how people are. So I'm just trying to help people think about things as they are, and it clarifies and it just simplifies. We'll get into more of that as you see how I answer the questions and why it makes sense. I will talk about some of the resources on my website. My website is www.crushingdoubt.org. I'm going to talk about some of the resources on there a little bit later. I want to get to some questions first, and then I'll talk about how you can get help with some of those resources. Okay. Scotty Styles has joined us here, and he's got his usual emojis. Love them. Great to see you here, Scotty. Thanks for joining us. Okay, let's jump in. I want to make sure I don't skip any questions. If I do happen to skip a question, please ask it again. I never mean to skip anybody. It's a very bad feeling to be skipped over and not be seen, especially in a place like this where I'm supposed to see everybody and help you feel that you're understood and that you're important, which you are. All right, Lynn Slavensky, we will start with you. Dan, could you tell me again why you know I have TMS? It was so helpful to hear. Okay, so TMS, first of all, is the term that Sarno used to describe mind-body symptoms. Initially, he was just trying to describe back pain. So it was called tension myositis syndrome, why the muscles got tense. He eventually came to see that it's a much broader thing, the mind-body interaction, but the term kind of stuck. Eventually, he changed it to tension myoneural syndrome, which is about how the brain makes changes in the body. So he was getting more and more onto it as he went. Whatever term you use for it doesn't matter, as long as you understand it's the mind is affecting the body. Now, Lynn wants to know, she's in the groups, so I told her why I know she has TMS or mind-body issues. So Lynn, I would say actually it's a combination of things that tells me that you have a mind-body issue. But here's the way I assess it. The first thing I want to do is make sure that you've gotten medically checked out, which you have been. Everybody I work with has been medically checked out in some way. Usually they've been checked out by multiple doctors. So we're already starting to move towards, I think you got a mind-body thing, because doctors are not getting you answers. Doctors can get you answers for things like if you have pneumonia, they recognize what it is, they give you an antibiotic, and you're better. That's the way a lot of medicine actually works. And doctors are especially good for things like that. But when they don't know what's going on, I start to very strongly suspect a mind-body issue. Now, there's lots of confirming aspects of this, Lynn, that build this even more. Why do you have a mind-body issue? Here's another one. Your symptoms don't stay the same. I know they feel like they do at times, but what did we start doing in group with you, Lynn, that really helped? We started tracking it a little bit more. I started asking you specifically, what's going on? And as an example, you said to me, yeah, when I take a shower, the symptoms go down. You know, you notice that there were certain things that happened. So the main reason I know you have a mind-body issue is that if we really look at the symptoms, there is a correlation between what goes on in your mind and what's going on in your body. There's no correlation between what goes on in your mind and your body when you have a broken arm. Your arm's broken, whether you like it or not, and whether you're thinking about it or not. It just is that way. Now, the pain from a broken arm can come and go a little bit more, not totally, because it's going to hurt, but it can go up and down with mind-body stuff put on top of it. But when you're seeing that the mind really does actually have these effects on the body, that's the main thing I want you all to get. Because if you understand that that's true and you can see that that's true, you'll know these are mind-body symptoms. So, Lynn, a lot of it's the way that your symptoms behave. Now, I want to reassure people out there, if your symptoms are not moving, that doesn't mean you don't have a mind-body issue. I'm just saying that with Lynn, that's one sign that she does. Now, here are some other signs. Let's say you have a symptom that's not moving. Here's another sign of a mind-body issue. If you, let's say, sprained your ankle and then it continued to hurt for 3 years. Well, logically speaking, that's a mind-body issue. Anything that lasts beyond the healing of a broken bone, 3 months, anything that's beyond that, it's mind-body. Now, listen, you can have a medical illness of some kind or a medical issue, but doctors will catch that. They'll understand what that is. If they have these kind of amorphous diagnoses or ones that are not clear or they're being debated, you got a mind-body issue. And the vast majority of people are having mind-body issues. I was talking to somebody recently and she was saying, but if what you're saying is true, that basically means everybody's sick right now, essentially, with this mind-body issue. And here's what I said to her. Yes, that is true. I hate to say it, but it is the human condition to have mind-body experience. And right now, it's really becoming a very rampant human condition to have mind-body issues that are out of control and getting debilitating because we're not aware of it and we're not seeing it. And now I'm trying to help people see it because that's going to bring this epidemic down. Sarno exposed the epidemic of back pain. We have to expose the epidemic of mind-body experience in general because it's finding its way into all these little cracks. Now I'm going to work in anxiety. Now I'm going to work in carpal tunnel. Now I'm going to work in knee pain. Now I'm going to work in burning and nerve issues and post-concussion syndrome. And it just goes everywhere. Long COVID, it goes everywhere. But if we're looking at the overall focus of doubt, we can bring it down. Back to your question, Lynn, why do I know you have mind-body issues? Because it tracks just like that. Your mind actually has an effect on them. That's one telltale sign. Another telltale sign is if they're not moving and not healing when they should. There's multiple ones. Here's another one, which is, are you what Sarno called a goodist? Are you always taking care of people and things like that? If all the factors that Sarno listed and that I list in my book, which is going to be here soon, the more factors there are, the less likely it becomes it's not this. But here's the other confirming factor, Lynn, and this is for Lynn and everybody. If I'm working with you on mind-body issues and I'm able to make these symptoms go away, well, that's really where the proof is. Okay, Lynn, I don't know if I answered your question to your satisfaction, but please do let me know. Okay, Karen Isaac says, when someone asks, what is the pain? Is it blood constricted, something being released into the body, lack of oxygen? I explain about the nervous system and body, all the things they're looking for the actual scientific answer. I explain all I've learned. This sod person is annoying, aka husband. I see. I think there must have been a typo, but okay, I understand that. So here's what I'm going to say about this. Okay, Lynn, I see you said perfect. Thank you. I'm glad that helped. Main thing is if there's a correlation between mind and body, then you got mind-body issues. And I can show the different correlation even when it's stuck. That's what one of the things the columns are good for. Okay, back to you, Karen. So how do you explain it? Yes, people are looking for a specific answer, and I'm going to give you my answer for that. Because I had the same question, even though I accepted the diagnosis, but I did wonder, well, what is this about? When I was reading Sarno, he said that, muscle pain, for example, came from oxygen deprivation. And I thought, okay, well, that sounds possible, like anaerobic exercise when you're, really working hard and you're not breathing quite as much, you can get soreness from lactic acid. That's what they say. Turns out that's actually not even true. That's just what they've been saying. And I don't blame Sarno for not knowing that. And Sarno, to his credit, went further than that, actually, later in his books. One thing he described is something called peptides. Peptides are a kind of messenger between the brain and the rest of the body. Now, he didn't quite get to this point that I'm now at, that I've come to understand, which is there's actually other messengers from the brain to the rest of the body and that can travel in the bloodstream. Essentially, what it is your hormone system. Hormones can get sent from your brain to any cell in the body, and any function that the cell has, it can make happen. In fact, that's how your whole body works, is that your brain operates. It can send messages to make it do things. It is sending a message to keep your heart beating all the time. And it's just doing that. And it sends a message to keep you breathing all the time. And it'll send a message to make you smile when you're happy, or cry when you're sad, or make your muscles hurt when you are angry and don't want to know about it. It can do all of these things. There's no difference between mind-body experience and this. I'm having a mind-body experience right here. I'm moving my arms because, listen, this is one of the reasons we talk with our hands. It's expressing your emotion. So our bodies are always expressing whatever's going on in our mental state. What's happening, though, in terms of why and how, it's chemical messengers. The brain is capable of sending chemical messengers anywhere in the body to any cell. Okay. Now, Karen then said, I know brain sends signals to the body. What is the literal signal? Okay, so these hormones can tell the cell to do anything that it wants. So the brain is the brain's extremely amazing. But one of the things that it can do is it can actually tell the cells whatever it wants to do. So if it's saying to, let's say it's saying to your back muscles, tighten up, okay? It will send whatever hormone tightens muscles. All the functions are there. This is how the system works. So it'll just send whatever messenger does the thing it needs to do. If it needs to make your eye twitch, it'll send the hormone that makes muscles twitch, and it'll send it there. And if it needs to make you feel physically ill, it's going to send stuff to your gut and work in that way. The hormones, they basically activate any cell in the way that they need to. Okay, I see you. Said person was what you were saying. If said person asked me more than this and doesn't get this, then Lord help me. Well said, Karen, because listen, we're giving a very scientific explanation. One thing I want to arm you with, Karen, is there are going to be people, including your husband or some other people, who may keep saying, no, it doesn't make sense. And actually what's happening is they're being resistant. So don't forget to put that into your arsenal of possibilities. That why do I need to explain everything to you? I just gave you the answer. You're just being a hardhead about it. Think about it. Here, put it back on them, Karen. Say, why doesn't it make sense? Start having them answer the questions. You've already answered the question. You gave them a good answer. Now, why is that not good enough? That's actually something I do when people have doubt. I don't mean it in a bad way. But if I've answered their doubts really well, and they keep saying, no, but I still have doubt, and prove me why not, I will actually say to them, wait, hold on. Why is what I said not enough yet? I'm not saying it critically, and I'm not challenging them or trying to make a problem for them, but I'm putting the question back where it belongs, because the real question is, why is that not enough? What I just said is such a solid explanation. It covers all territory. It's completely scientific. It's completely logical. If that's not enough for that person, then the next question is, why is that not enough? Let's find out what you have to say about that, Karen, or whether you like that. Okay. All right. Let me just make sure I didn't miss any questions before this. I see some. Okay, hold on. Karen, I said one more thing. I literally had trouble lifting my arm off and on. The pain went from shooting, burn, from forearm, the shoulder. I talked to it, said, you're not getting me. Okay, so it is good to start talking to the brain, because remember, whatever's happening up here is going to determine what happens down here in the body. Your body is one big extension of your brain. Self-talk is a huge part of what has to happen here. It's going to become automatic. I don't really even think about it all that much. Whenever anything happens to me, I think of my body as a flowing emotion, and I just think, oh, what's bothering me? If I get a pain, I don't think, what happened to my shoulder? I think, what happened in my mind? What happened with my feeling? So let's keep working at it, guys. All right. We've got a couple questions coming in from Instagram. Cindy Attias, good to see you here. Rudemaster27, hello. Good to see you. Thanks for waving hi. Okay, now there's a couple of responses to the hormone explanation. Cindy Attias said the hormone explanation. I think it's the first time I've heard that, and it makes so much sense. Wow, so obvious. Isn't it interesting? So much of this, and then it is Layla says, yes, the hormone explanation is fascinating. So much of this actually is really obvious, and it shocked the hell out of me. When I read Sarno, I was like, oh my God, it was so obvious. But, there's a reason that all of these things are getting past our radar. There's actually multiple reasons. And in my book, I outline why. What are all the reasons that we're not seeing the obvious? We aren't even seeing the obvious as obvious when we see it. Instead, we're seeing these really not obvious things as true. Things that are being explained to us. For example, people will say, well, the reason we're having pain is because of these little microfractures. That's not obvious. That's actually weird. That's like a really weird concept. But if there's an overarching structure to the whole thing, and you know that your brain already can make all these things happen in the body, why can't it do it for these purposes? And in these ways? Of course it can. Of course it can. I think this explanation is incredibly important, and it's one of the main questions I had when I was doing my reading. I was like, listen, Sarno, I love you. You're great. Oxygen deprivation, I could see it potentially, but why would it function that way for all mind-body issues? What's the overarching thing? And the funny thing is, basically, he gave the basic idea. The mind controls the body. That's the overarching idea. But then how? Many of us need to know how. I couldn't buy into it if it didn't make full sense. Okay, Ed Layla says, can the brain cause mineral deficiencies as well? Is this a weird question? No, there's no weird questions because you have that question. You need it answered. There literally are no weird questions. Can the brain cause mineral deficiencies? Yes, it can. I'm going to tell you how, though. First of all, you can get a mineral deficiency because you're not taking in enough minerals of some kind. That, of course, that can happen. But I also know that how we metabolize what we take in is determined by the brain. This happens all the time. My wife is a type 1 diabetic, and she can take tons of insulin. If she's stressed out, it does nothing because her body essentially rejects it. It does not metabolize it because she's stressed out. So it doesn't even take it in. Remember, when we take in something, it goes into our bloodstream, but does it get metabolized? Not necessarily. If you are stressed out or the body, or you, for some reason, you don't want to take that in, the body just passes it straight through, in the excretory system. So it doesn't actually happen. Now, if that keeps happening, you can get a mineral deficiency from that sort of thing, or vitamin deficiency from that sort of thing. Now, of course, there is a real world, like if you're not getting enough sunshine, you get a vitamin D deficiency. If you're not, taking in enough vitamin C, you can get a vitamin C deficiency. But there are all kinds of deficiencies that can happen because of mind-body experience. And this is one of the problems I have with the testing that's done medically. They do tests and they see these results and they say, oh, look at this. But if you don't know why those results are happening, and you certainly if you don't know the various possibilities of why, then you're not going to get a good answer. And I find if a doctor doesn't know about mind-body experience, I take it with a grain of salt what they say about not everything, because life or death stuff, got to trust them and they do know what they're doing. But about many other things, I say put your doubt armor on. Like be protective of yourself about what they're saying. Okay, EMC 9454, good to see you here. Pain-free comeback, good to see you here as well. Thanks for joining us. Okay, let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, I got Catherine Toomer's got some questions here, and then I'll jump back over to YouTube. All right, Catherine, good to see you. Hi, Dr. Dan. After that small time of hopelessness last week, after mentioning that on this Q&A, my hopelessness has for now disappeared. Okay, well, listen, moment-to-moment experience always. We're always changing, and if we get the right mindset, we're going to be fine. And that's what happened for you, Catherine. If it does return, we'll just do it again. And the more we do it, the better this gets and the more practiced you are. And as I had said, even with the feeling of hopelessness, I continue to make progress. You said that probably my trauma had been triggered to bring on hopelessness. I do agree with that. It's funny when people quote me to me, I'm like, that was good, which is good because it means I'm agreeing with what I'm seeing and I'm consistent in my thinking. Not sure which thing triggered it, but lots of changes. My tenure as nanny to my grandchild is almost over. Well, that sounds like it would be a very loaded thing. In addition, my daughter is pregnant again. I'm thrilled, but was devastated within myself, not to her, that I couldn't fully express my happiness because some OCD and intrusive thoughts erupted. Probably due to fear for her, because she has had a miscarriage and some rugged time, or I think rough time was probably what you meant, and some rough time during the first trimester of her first child. The OCD stuff erupting is traumatic in itself. Okay, just an update, but we'll love comments. So thank you for the update, Catherine. I think you're really well onto it. Trauma activation is a form of emotions column symptoms, but it's like the biggest form of emotions column symptoms. Trauma activation is when your feelings are so strong and they're so big. And trauma activation involves a lot of symptoms. It involves things like brain fog. You just can't think straight. I sometimes can't even read when my trauma is activated. I mean, I can, but it's harder. And so I've learned to notice the signs. Oh, my trauma's activated. I just don't feel good. Or being overly pessimistic or overly hopeless or extra tired. These are all signs of trauma activation, which is the extreme form of emotions column symptom activation. So, Catherine, my main comment is you're doing a great job thinking about the types of things that lead to this. I'm just doing this part of the editing of my book in this final round, and it's about the emotions column. And it's describing, or I am describing, the types of emotional experience that can lead to symptoms. Catherine, you were doing a very good job of knowing what types of things would do it. When you list this here, your tenure as a nanny of the grandchild, that's big. This is an important person in your life. It's a shift that makes sense of the timing. That could be it. I'm not saying it is, but it could be. Your daughter being pregnant, the intrusive thoughts being their own symptom and struggle. That's another one. The miscarriage idea. You're thinking through things that are high stakes. Nothing that isn't high stakes is going to cause a symptom in the emotions column. It's high stakes. It means a lot. So I just think you're doing great work. And you said, thanks for all. You are welcome, Catherine. You're doing great. Okay. All right. Scotty Style says, yes, this confirmatory evidence can help us to untangle our doubts, which actually heals the pain. You must have confirmatory evidence all the time. That brings down the doubt. It's got to make sense. All right. Now, Scotty then says, I'm moving right now. This is a mind-body experience. I love that. Ha ha. Yeah. Okay. So that was when I was doing this, right? This is a mind-body experience. Anything is a mind-body experience. And I think that going along with Cindy's comment about the hormone explanation and how obvious it actually is, it's really important that we see. I'm not saying anything, revolutionary here. I mean, I think the way that I describe the columns is very new and very helpful, but really I'm just describing, we've always known this. We just started denying it in certain ways, and it makes no sense. The mind controls everything the body does. I mean, without a mind, you can't do anything. Okay, well, we'll keep at it. Let's see. Kristen Park, good to see you here. I see Scotty Styles likes the concept of doubt armor. Really important. Doubt armor to me, what does that mean? It means that I am going to take it with a grain of salt. I'm gonna have like a doubt shield that you don't even know is there necessarily. I don't mean you, like you guys, but I mean the doctor or somebody else who thinks they know what they're talking about but doesn't know mind-body experience. I'm going to be very wary of it. And it doesn't matter who it is, even people I really trust, because if they end up saying things like, yep, I heard that, our shoulders have just started getting weaker over time. People read these things, these non-obvious weird things, and then they start spreading them. It's kind of fake news, I guess. And we have to be on our watch for that. And that's what doubt armor is. It's saying, if you don't know about mind-body experience, then I'm going to take with a grain of salt whether you know anything. I don't care how good of a doctor you are. There's a doctor, for example, I've been a baseball fan my whole life. There's a guy named Dr. James Andrews. I mean, nothing against him personally, but he definitely doesn't understand mind-body experience. Most doctors don't. And this is a guy who does all the Tommy John, or a lot of the Tommy John surgeries, or at least diagnoses who needs them. In sports, he's sometimes called the Grim Reaper, because once you have an issue and you're seeing Dr. James Andrews, you're going to end up with Tommy John surgery because he thinks everything goes there. Well, he doesn't know about mind-body experience. That's a problem. That makes it so, even though he is supposedly some leading expert, I think he's basically like a 4-year-old. There's no difference. He doesn't know anything about this really. And it's a sad commentary, but it really is true. Okay. Rhiannon, thanks for your patience. Here we go on your question. Hi, Dan. You mentioned the other day that two main reasons psychological therapies are often failing is that they don't understand doubt and are not trauma informed. Could you expand more on the latter? Okay. So I do think that medicine is not the only field that is really failing. Psychology has been failing us for a long time in certain ways. Both fields are doing great work in certain regards. And then both fields are also really messing up certain things. One of the things that the psychological field is messing up is not understanding doubt. And as a result, a lot of times the patient will come in with doubt and it'll make the therapist doubt. And then the therapist voices that doubt and that makes the patient doubt more. And it just goes on and on and on. And nobody's stopping it. Well, one of my functions and one of the reasons I can be so useful is I will stop doubt. You're never going to get past me. I know about it and we're going to stop it. So people just don't understand how big doubt can be. By the way, doubt isn't just about symptoms. There's 3 levels of doubt. Level 1 doubt is, do I have a mind-body symptom or not? Or is this medical? Level 2 doubt is my mind-body symptom, even though I've accepted it is it harder to conquer? Like, are different symptoms different? And then level 3 doubt, this is the one where therapy really needs to get involved more. And that's the one we work on in the power column, which is my high-speed therapy, essentially. My systems version of it. Is doubt about the self. There's so much doubt about the self, and you all are learning more about this and how dominant a force it is. But as I keep talking about it, you're going to see it's even more of a dominant force than you think. Doubt is ruling the world right now, ruling the world, and psychology is not really even seeing it. But that's what doubt wants to do. It wants to not be seen. It's the one defense that has snuck under the radar. Okay, now, could you expand more on the latter? The latter is about being trauma-informed. Being trauma-informed means this. In psychology, there are really 2 main movements. One is the psychodynamic movement, and another is cognitive behavioral, CBT. And cognitive behavioral is basically about changing your thought patterns. It's getting control of your thought patterns. Psychodynamic is more about there's an unconscious. We have all these feelings, that we need to discover. It's an insight-oriented therapy. We have, and it also talks about the fact that our past experiences continue to influence us. Both perspectives do provide helpful things. However, recent therapies are gravitating more, and I'm glad to see this, towards something called trauma-informed. Trauma-informed means they understand the impact of trauma. Trauma, that might sound like it's more the psychodynamic side, but psychodynamic, they only understand that traumas from early childhood can lead to setting our kind of style, setting our expectations. What they don't understand is that trauma can happen at any given moment, unfortunately. And when trauma happens, what does it mean? It means you have an experience where essentially you now understand things in a totally different way, and you're never going to be the same. That's what trauma is. And everybody has trauma, some form of it, some, with a capital T, where anyone would see it as trauma, like a rape or witnessing a murder or being at 9/11 or things like that. But the lowercase t traumas, I don't even love that term because it makes it sound lesser. And I suppose in some ways it could be lesser in that it's just not always going to affect people in the same way. But these are things that change us. When I had a falling out with a therapist, that was, I guess, a lowercase t trauma, but it was one of the most traumatic things that I ever experienced, and I've never been the same. Now, that doesn't mean I'm all worse. It doesn't mean it's all bad. It just means life altering. So trauma informed means I understand how this altered your life. I understand the meaning of it. And they work on processing the meaning of that experience. Rhiannon, with respect to you, I'll say a little bit about what I know. You had, you've told me that your growing up was, pretty great, but then you had some events in your early 20s that were really hard for you. I would say those were traumatic. They altered your life, and I think in some ways, because you had such good experiences up to that point, they were all the more traumatizing. You were like, oh my God, life can be something where this happens. So A trauma-informed therapist understands that perspective. It's incredibly important because otherwise they'll miss the signs of what's happening. If your trauma's activated, like you've had a repeat experience of that, a trauma-informed therapist is going to be like, hey, this was like your trauma. This is activating that again, right? But somebody who's not trauma-informed would be like, huh, it seemed like you had a big response to that. Let's explore that for 2 years. They just don't get right to it. They don't see what's going on. They're very misinformed. That's a shorthand answer, Rhiannon. There's a lot more to it, but I want to know if that helps enough for now or gives you something to go on. Let me know with a follow-up, okay? All right, Jane Smith, good to see you here. Hi, Dr. Dan. Thanks for being here. In the car again and might lose connection. So distressed at losing a tooth and had a migraine for 3 days and abdominal pain is back. All right, I'm sorry about that. Both. I know the distress is causing the pain, but what should I do? Okay. Okay, I see Rhiannon says, perfect. Thanks, Dan. Okay, I'm glad that helped. So, Jane, let's talk about what to do. Whenever anybody asks me the question, what to do, the columns are incredibly helpful information. They're very organizing. And one of the things that they're very useful for is we can always fall back on, let's analyze this moment. We can go back and say, there's only 3 columns. What's happening here? Okay. Now, you're saying, I know the distress is causing the pain. What is that signaling to me? Your doubt's down. You know what this is. You do have one doubt. Will I know what to do? Will I be able to know what to do? There's a lot of level 3 doubt for you in this. As you explore this system more and more and get the basics, especially if you come to group, which I'll talk about in a second. I'm not saying you need to do that, Jane, but if somebody wants to, you can learn from me directly. It's a lot like these Q&As, but we go even further in any sitting because we can ask back and forth questions. It's a Zoom call. They are not recorded. And I think everybody learns from each conversation. Kristen Park, I see you said hello. I'm sorry I missed that. Good to see you. In these groups, we all learn from each other. They're these great conversations, but they get so much further, even further than in these. I think these Q&As are great, but if you want to get somewhere really fast, I would say come take a look at my website, www.crushingdown.org, and check out the groups. And the seminars are also great. They're not live interaction with me, though. They're pre-recorded. They tell you all about mind-body experience. And the great thing is you can start them whenever you want, and you can watch them again and again and again. And they tell all about the mind-body field, why one person says this and one person says this, and makes comprehensive sense of it all. Then it introduces the system. Then it talks about what to do about it. So, Jane, you're asking what to do about it. Well, you know the distress is causing the pain. This is an emotions column, onset or uptick. So what do? We need to pinpoint what the distress is. This is something that happens a lot of times where people say, no, I know what I'm upset about, or I know that I'm upset. It's got to be more specific. If you just know that you're upset, what is it about? If you know what you're upset about, but the symptom isn't coming down, then you need to know why you're upset. Why specifically? Why does this thing get you the way it is? So let's say we were talking in group, Jane. I would want to say, okay, I would ask you questions about what was going on. What about the timing? What was happening here? What was bothering you? And then once you identify what was bothering you, I would ask you, why is it bothering you? And I'd help you uncover that. I'd help you pull it out. That's what we need to do. So Jane, you can do it on your own or with me, but that's what we need to do. Okay. All right. Pain-free comeback. Good to see you here. I've been wondering if the rash of arm injuries in MLB, Major League Baseball, has something to do with mind-body pain. Great point. It's all about mind-body pain. In fact, there were no Tommy John surgeries, 60 years ago. I make this point in my book. There was a famous Cleveland pitcher, so I'm from Cleveland. But his numbers, I had to look at the numbers because he pitched so many innings. This is Bob Feller. He threw almost twice as many innings as pitchers are even allowed to throw now. There's so much fragility, and it makes no sense. Think about this. Why would a pitcher be able to throw 220 innings, but they can't throw 230? What's that? They just suddenly can't do that? No, we can keep doing it. That's like saying to a marathon runner, listen, you really shouldn't run more than 5 miles. We're not far away in society from people starting to say nonsense like that. And then if that takes hold and people believe it, that's what people will think. And then what will happen? There will be many more injuries that happen. And increasingly, we are telling ourselves how fragile we are, and it just goes on and on and on. So I think it really is important. All of these injuries that are happening in baseball and the way that it's talked about make no sense. In fact, there was a study. Georgie Oldfield is a physiotherapist in England, and she did a TED talk and mentioned this. In the sporting world, they did a study of athletes who were having no pain, no symptoms whatsoever. And 50% of all Major League Baseball players had torn ulnar collateral ligaments that they didn't even know they had. And they were completely functional, totally functional, not affecting their play, no pain. How can we say we're being rational if we're just going to dismiss that information? That makes no sense at all. All right. Rita said, so much common knowledge is fallacious. I agree. We have to learn to be very skeptical. It's so weird. We're like very skeptical of certain things, like mind-body issues. We tend to be more skeptical of the things that are true than we are of the things that are not. And I'm wary of common knowledge at this point. After my experience with back pain and how I got it resolved, and even my experience, I don't mean anything bad by this, but even in the mind-body community, as I explored it, I was like, these are the cream of the crop, the best people. They're doing great work, but even they weren't getting certain things. So I had to start realizing I'm going to have to start thinking for myself. I'm going to have to think really critically about these things. Rita, I see you say, I live near Tommy John, the actual Tommy John that the surgery is named after. That's funny, Rita. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Jazz Sack Sailor, good to see you here. Okay, Cindy Ataya said, Dr. Shimon Russell has a great explanation of the microtrauma, trauma inflicted by 1,000 mini cuts. So that's interesting. I'd like to hear more about it, Cindy. The only thing I'll say is, we just have to have a critical eye towards things. I'm open to whatever. I'm open to science and logic. I shouldn't say whatever. I'm open to science and logic. So if he said this is a potential great explanation, but is it scientific and logical? And I'm not saying it is or it isn't, Cindy. I would want to hear more. I will say this. I think it is a little bit suspicious that doctors want to blame these issues on something you just can't see and there's no full explanation for. And why is it that in some people but not others? It just doesn't totally add up. So you got to keep in mind, there's going to be a lot of great seeming explanations, but you got to see, does it actually match up all the way? And the mind-body way of thinking about it, to my mind, does by far the best job. Okay, Cindy, let me know if you want to say more about that. We are going to have to stop shortly, but hopefully we get something in there. Teresa then said, this is very fascinating. I got to remember what we were talking about at that point. Also heard of multiple personality disorder where one personality is diabetic and another personality is not. Yes, that is actually a true thing. And if that's true, that's further proof of mind-body experience. Wow, that's a really big one. Thanks for bringing that up, Teresa. Okay, she says, I think the smaller traumas add up, and especially after a big trauma, the smaller ones affect you more. So that's that little T trauma, big T trauma. I agree. In fact, I find that as we do this work and as we discover more about what goes on for us, we get more in touch with how things have hurt. And as we get more in touch, it gets easier and better in one way. And yet I find that I was more sensitive than I thought I was, even though I'm a pretty sensitive person. But that's not bad. It's just something that I need to know about. And it's also a sign of progress. I've taken in the fullness of my trauma. That's an expression that I use. And it means that I am actually self-empathic. I understand what I've been through. So even when little things happen, if they bother me, I'm like, yeah, that sucked. I'm not going to hurt anybody by being empathic to myself. Thanks for sharing that, Teresa. Okay, Jazz Sack Sailor says, hi, Dan. Could you briefly describe the work, in quotes, to do in each column? Do you consider this a practice? Okay, so I'll answer the first one first. The work that we do in each column. In the emotions column, the task is to outline essentially 6 to 12 themes that are the basic major themes that upset you and why, so that you can use that emotional menu to identify the acute onset and uptick in symptoms. That's what to do in the emotions column. In the doubt column, you are going to do 3 things: observe, articulate, and counter every doubt. To observe doubt is to recognize, or to call it into question, really, to not let it sneak past you as fact, to wonder about it. We got to wonder first. That's observing. Articulating is just what it sounds like. You're getting it put into words. But when you put it into words, you can hear what you're actually saying, and you can actually counter it. And that's what countering is. You can counter with science and logic, or you can counter with what you know in your own experience. So that's what you do in the Tao column. In the power column, there are two tasks. There's the core narrative, which tells the story of your core suffering self. We all have many parts to our identities, but the core narrative tells about who are you in how you've suffered. And that has three parts to it, which is how have I suffered? How has it impacted me? And what am I going to do about it? So you build that core narrative, and that builds self-understanding. And the other task in the power column is to assess for power moment to moment and adjust when you're out of power. Figure out new ways to adjust. That's all the work. I just told you all the work there is to do in the columns. I know for some that may feel confusing, or you might need to learn more. You can work with me on that. But one thing I do like about what I just said is, if you think about it, there wasn't that much that needs to be done. There's one main task in the emotions column, and then you use the timing of the symptoms and those themes to manage acute symptoms, onsets and upticks. You go through observe, articulate, and counter in the doubt column to bring down the doubt. And then you do the core narrative and assess for power and adjust. That's it. Now, do I consider this a practice? I think some of that will depend on what you mean by that term, but I guess I would say this. I think of it as a way of living. It's a way of thinking about things that I have incorporated into my life. If that's a practice, like in the way that like a meditation practice is a practice, yes, I consider this a practice. And I think it's something that I want to help everybody do so naturally that they can continue living their lives doing whatever they want to do, but have it be something that is kept up with regularity. I think that's what your question really is, Jazz X Sailor, is this something that you just do once and then you're done? Or do you consider it to be something that you do long-term? I do consider it to be something that's long-term. However, you can reduce symptoms fast in the short run. Let me know if I answered that question to your satisfaction. Okay. And Cindy, I do really want to get back to you at some point about the idea of micro trauma, because I want to know what you're thinking there. I don't want to leave you on a cliffhanger. And I want to make sure that you have the information you need and that what I said was helpful. Okay. So let's talk about it as needed. Okay. Karen Isaacs then says, a man at my pool told me as we get older, the body breaks down. I told him I don't believe that. We discussed Sarno. He's read all the books, then told me he was a cop and down at World Trade Center at 9/11. He knows he carries all that in his body, and at 68, he's feeling it. Okay. So let me give my answer to does the body break down? Bodies get older. They do. Our hair turns gray. We can get wrinkles. Our reflexes can get worse. My vertical leap on the basketball court is not what it used to be in some ways, though that's actually mostly just because I weigh more than I did in high school. But the body doesn't break down very fast, and it doesn't break down for a long time. So I believe that, unless you're in your, I would say at this point, the way life expectancies are, unless you're in your mid 80s or beyond, you shouldn't expect much to break down at all. And so I think in that way, Karen, we're totally in agreement. But even when, I don't even like the term breaking down that way, but even when there are changes to the body, most of the things that people complain about, all these symptoms, they're not because the body is breaking down. Okay. If that were true, 90-year-olds would just be writhing on the ground all the time, and they aren't. So I think, Karen, we're in very much agreement about that, but let me know. Okay. Let me know if what I said represented that. Okay. Cindy Tyus, thanks for getting back to me. We'll finish up on this. For example, when a teen acts out, it could be because, oh, I see what you're saying. For example, when a teen acts out, it could be because they had a reading disability as a child, and every night the parents compared them to a sibling who didn't. Now they have a trigger as an adult when they have to read out loud at work. So it's not something that's so obvious. Got it. I'm so glad we clarified that. I thought you were saying micro traumas, meaning micro fractures. So I was like, got to get her out of that doubt. So what you're saying is basically micro traumas. I don't know why I read it that way, Cindy. You said it clearly, but thank you for clarifying. So what she's saying, and I agree with this, is that a lot of traumas, I'm glad we can laugh about that. Thanks, Cindy. A lot of traumas aren't obvious. They come death by 1,000 paper cuts. Yes. All those times that your reality was undermined, it's usually not. It's usually not the case that you're like totally fine and then one time your reality was undermined and that's the trauma. No, usually it was undermined again and again and again and again in this way and in that way and in this way. And you start to feel like, okay, that's just what I expect all the time. So Cindy, great observation. I'm sorry again for mixing that up. I must be tired. But the reason I answered the question the way that I did though, Cindy, is I wanted to make sure that you were not thinking that physically there's like these micro traumas. Psychologically, there are. Okay. And I see what you said. Yes. And often innocently. Yeah. A lot of these things can be innocent. We'll put in quotes because I do want people to be more aware of the impact they can have. But all of these things can happen and build up. And we got to watch out for that. So Cindy, thanks for sharing that. That's great. All right. Last question here for tonight. Kristen Park says, what do you think about journaling for TMS or mind-body issues? It makes me feel like I must find the emotion or memory to release it in order to alleviate symptoms. Here's what I think, Kristen. I think journaling can be very helpful for emotions column issues. For doubt issues, it's like beating your head against a brick wall. I call it beating your head against the emotional brick wall. So journaling can be great for discovering emotional information. But I actually think journaling is much better within the columns because you can journal based on the columns. For example, I could have you journal about doubt. Instead of just free-flowing journaling, I could say, okay, instead of looking for that emotion, since your symptoms are sticking around and they're seemingly chronic, I want to find out more about doubt. What do you think about that? So journaling is a tool to discover more about what's going on in you. But if it is used indiscriminately and they just say, just keep looking for the emotion, it can drive people crazy, especially if that's not the source. And a lot of times it isn't. It's only for the onsets and upticks in symptoms that you want to look for that emotion. So this is a major problem that I think we have in the mind-body community that I'm looking to change and address, which is to understand, why do certain things work at one point, but not at another? We need the answer to that. And journaling is one of them. Why does it work to get a symptom down when it is emotional and it was that symptom distraction? Because it helps you discover the right information. Why does it not help when your symptoms are not budging? Because doubt is the issue. It has nothing to do with what you're going to be journaling about. We got to journal about the right thing if we're going to journal. I hope that makes sense, Kristen, but do let me know. We do have to wrap up for today, guys, but great questions. Tremendously wide range of good topics that really, I think, can help people think about these things. And I'm so appreciative of you all. Okay, Kristen then said, agree. It makes me feel stuck. And exactly like you said, banging my head against the wall, I do have a lot of doubt. Well, good news. The columns won't get you stuck. There are 3 columns, and they explain exactly what's going on in a way where we can take any moment and shift out of the wrong problem and into the right problem so that we can address it. As Layla said, this was a great live. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. The kind words, Layla. I appreciate it. And thank you all. I just wanted to say again, this is a fantastic community. It's a growing community. And I think the more people who understand the columns, it's going to free us up because we don't get stuck on those problems. It is Layla said, they are all great. I appreciate you, Layla. Rhiannon then said, thank goodness the mind-body syndrome community or symptom community has you, Dan. Thanks, Rhiannon. Thanks for the flowers, Rita. Thank you for the thank you, Kristen. It's been great, guys. If you do want to check out my resources, it's www.crushingdoubt.org. On there are right now 2 main resources. The seminars will teach you all about mind-body issues, teach you all about the columns and how you can start to implement them. Those are pre-recorded, 12 hours of information, very cost-effective for what you're getting. And I've been very pleased at the response to them. Then there are the groups. You can come to see me Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, one time a week, 2 times a week, 3 times a week, whatever you want to do in your plan. And they are Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, and Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. I tried to set up the time so people around the world could access these things, because what I found is even when you get my information, a lot of times you need help implementing it. And that's what the groups are for. Alice Atkins, thank you for joining us. You're just getting here right at the end, so I'm going to miss you largely. But I hope you come back next week to check things out, or feel free to email me if you want to, dan@crushingdoubt.org, if you have questions. Okay, guys, it has been a pleasure. I will be here same time next week. We'll keep up the questions, the answers, keep getting you answers. That's the key. When you know what's going on, that's when you know you can get better. Okay, thanks, guys. Good to see you all, and I will see you again soon.